morning.
Good morning.
So now, as we all already know, this is going to be a session on effective evaluation. So first of all, I would like to know from you as to what exactly you think an evaluation is. So how would we define an evaluation?
From context perspective or general?
Just for in a general perspective.
General perspective is to analyze and add value for that specific individual speech.
Right.
And from context perspective, create a wow effect when I speak on the speech.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, the most immediate effects which the person can add to his speech to give a wow effect to his speech later on. So if he has to make the same speech again, we have to give him what he did best, which he can add a little bit effects more to.
Right.
What recommendations we can give so that it becomes from best, better, and the number one speech. So something that he can work on, and summary.
Right. Okay. So can we define an evaluation as basically the systematic analysis of a speech and the delivery of that analysis? Right? We can define an evaluation like that. Okay. Now let's move on to the second thing, that is what exactly is the purpose of an evaluation?
Is to improve or improve.
Okay. Okay. To improve.
Get to know the scope where we can improve and
Okay.
make better speech next time.
Okay.
And also learn about mistakes me as a speaker commit.
Right. Right. So now for an evaluation, the idea is not just to help one particular speaker, it's to help every single person sitting in the room. So now if I evaluated a speech today, my objective was not just to help Umesh as a speaker, it was to help every single one of us, including myself. Because in my own evaluation, in my own analysis, while doing that, I'm also going to learn something new in every evaluation I do, whether it's my first evaluation or my 100th evaluation. So an evaluation is a continuous process of learning for every single person who is going to be a part of it, whether as a listener or as a speaker. Right? So now we will now directly go into what exactly needs to be done in preparation for an evaluation. Now, if I know I'm going to be evaluating a speech today, this is going to start a little before that. My evaluation is not going to start, my work is not going to start just at the moment the speaker delivers the speech, it's going to start a little before that. So, a few things that we need to keep in mind when we know that we are going to evaluate. The first thing, the most important thing for any evaluation is the objectives of the speech. Now, if I'm going to be evaluating a speech, the primary thing on which any speech is evaluated is the objectives of that particular project. So I need to ensure that I'm familiar with the objectives, I know the objectives back and forth, and I know exactly what it is that the speaker is expected to accomplish through that particular speech. Now, once that is done, it's also ideal to do one additional thing, if possible. Now, it may not be possible every single time, but it's better if it's done. That is, we go through the feedback or the evaluations that the speaker has received for their previous speeches. So, for example, if I am evaluating, suppose someone's CC5, CC6 speech, I have the manual in my hand. Right? So, I can just quickly go through the feedback that the speaker has received for the speeches from CC1 to CC5. Now, why this is to be done? Because any evaluation needs to be calibrated according to the needs of that particular speaker. Every single person who is going to come up here on stage is going to come here with a different level of skill. And we as evaluators need to keep that level of skill in mind and give our commentations and recommendations according to that. The same recommendation, the same commentation is not necessarily something that will be applicable for everyone. It's something that needs to be specifically customized according to the needs of the speaker. And for us to help understand those needs, it's essential to go through the objectives of through the feedback and evaluation that the speaker has received for their previous speeches. Now, if we have seen that speaker often, then we already have a good idea. So again, this is something that helps in that regard automatically. Now, apart from the objectives, it may also happen that the speaker has certain personal objectives for the speech as well. So if I am a new speaker, suppose, and I am doing my CC5, CC6 speech again, and I think that even then I did not maybe accomplish my CC3 or CC4 or CC5 objectives properly, and that may be something that I am specifically looking to improve on in this newer speech. So it's not something that's there in the objectives of that particular project necessarily, but I as an evaluator can reach out to the speaker and ask the speaker as to what their personal objectives for that speech are and whether they need some specific inputs based upon those personal objectives as well. This helps to ensure that we add more and more value to the speaker over and above what the objectives of that speech are going to deliver for that speaker. Right? So now all of this comes under the preparation that we need to do before we have actually even begun the evaluation, before the speech has even started. Right? Now this is again now I'll come to the second point, which is something I've seen as a common question, that is how to structure an evaluation. Right? Now I would like to again know from you as to how we structure an evaluation on paper, not the delivery. Firstly on paper, because the delivery is something that will happen later. Firstly, we write down our notes for an evaluation, and it's critical to make sure that those notes are written down properly so that while delivering it, we are going to be able to read it out very well, very fluently without any breaks in it. So let's discuss some of the ways in which we note down our evaluation, whatever points that we have.
Try to see on one side, R's on the other.
Right. That's the first thing. Any other?
Main highlight of the speech,
Right.
few recommendations,
Right.
and one summary.
Right. Okay. So now I also have the sheet that I use to evaluate, to note down the evaluations today. So we can also use this for reference. Now this is a technique that I have been using for a long time, and like through experience I have modified it a little bit here and there. Now it's a technique that I have developed, not necessarily that everyone needs to use it, but I'll be sharing it across because it's something that has worked for me and maybe will work for all of us here as well. Right? So like Abhinay said, first thing is to divide the commendations and recommendations into two clear columns, because those are the two distinct parts of any evaluation and those need to be separated on paper, right? Visually as well and in our delivery as well. Those need to be distinct. So that's the first thing. Now another thing, if you can see, there are 2-3 lines at the top as well. Right? Now this, what I normally do is, if it's say a speech that you're maybe not very familiar with, generally what happens is, now for the experienced Toastmasters here, if it's a CC speech, we pretty much know the objectives back and forth, right? So we don't need to specifically have to go through it and note down stuff properly. But if it's a new project, and even now with pathways, maybe they're not familiar with all the objectives. So we can quickly have a short summary of the objectives of that speech here in our own word. The project is maybe 2, 3, 4 pages, the material for that. So it's not possible to write all of it down, but in our mind, what we feel are the most important parts that the speaker needs to accomplish in that project can be written down in those 2-3 lines at the top quickly. So that while evaluating, I can quickly use those for reference. Okay. Now once that is done, I have my commendations and recommendations column separated. I have the specific objectives for that speech, a quick summary of that written above. Now I'll meld this with the delivery part as well, because now this is where the delivery and the structuring of the delivery and the structuring of paper will start to gel together. So the first thing that in any evaluation that we do is that we don't directly dip into the commendations, right? We have something else that we do, because any evaluation is not just a dry analysis, it's a speech in itself. And any speech has an opening, a body and a conclusion. So any evaluation as well should have an opening, a body and a conclusion. So it's in this context, it's important to have something at the start to serve as the opening without directly going into the commentations that we have. So again, something simple. What we can do is have a line or two about how the speech impacted you personally or what you felt about that speech. It does not need to be a commendation or a recommendation at all. It's just a general comment on what you felt about that speech. Right? So for example, what I said today, that I feel sad because Umesh is not going to be able to participate in the humorous contest this year. Right? So for context, it's because he is the division director, so any district officers are not allowed to participate, right? In case the context was this. Right? So this is something, it's a something simple that immediately draws the audience in and makes them actually want to listen to the evaluation without having them feel like it's just a dry analysis now that I have to listen to. Right? So this is something to establish a quick connect, to show that this is the connect I felt, maybe you felt it too as the audience. Right? So that is what will serve as the opening of my evaluation. Now once that is done, I can now move in to the actual body, that is the commendation. Now again here, when we note down things, we note them down as and when we feel it. Right? It's not necessary that that this is a good order to go in for the delivery, because those points may not link together. Any speech needs to have the idea structured in a proper flow to make sure that everything connects, and it's the same for an evaluation. The things that I feel, any commendations or recommendations that I have, may not work well in the sequence that I have written them down. So here again, it's a simple thing that I do. While writing down, I just put in small serial numbers next to it. So the first thing that I had written was that it's an interesting choice of topic, formation of ideas. That was just my first note. Okay. The second was relevant to everyone instantly. Now this is not the order in which I actually delivered my evaluation. That was not my first commendation. So here, simple thing that I do, I have all those serial numbers listed down. 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the commendation. And later, at the bottom, I just have a few numbers. Now here I have 3, 1, 2, 4, 5 written down. So what I do is, after the speech is over, after I have written down all my notes, I go through my notes once again and see in which sequence I can have the structure so that the idea gets through better. Okay. So it's here that this numbering comes into play, and it makes our job very much easier. Because I have a quick sequence now in which I can write, and now when I am actually delivering my evaluation, I can just read 3, I'll go here, I deliver that, I'll read 1, I can go to point number 1 here, and keep giving those points according to the sequence that I specified. As I said, so this serves the purpose of having a proper flow to your evaluation where each commendation and recommendation is connected to the preceding one and to the next one. Right? Now, the next point regarding structuring. So this is a very common thing that I've seen, and I'm sure all of us here have seen it at some point or the other, is during the transition from the commendations to the recommendations. Now we ideally like to follow the CRC format, right? With commendation, recommendation, commendation, where we start with something good about the speaker's delivery, about the speech, so that the speaker wants to listen to us. We give some commendations, and we end with commendations again, so that the speaker goes back feeling good about themselves. Right? Because the objective of an evaluation is to help the speaker, not make them feel that they never want to come up on stage again. So that's why this format is there. But now, in this transition from the first C to the R, I'm sure we have heard this way that the speech was good, but to take it to the next level, you can do this. Or any speech can always have some recommendations, so you can do this, right? So these are a few of the phrases that we see very commonly used. Right? And if we can see things that are very commonly used, we can definitely try out something new. Now it's here that our creativity comes into play in evaluation, the creativity and presence of mind. It's not possible to have 150 different phrases memorized for any evaluation and say that, okay, I'm going to use this one for the transition at this time, I'll use that one at this some other time. Okay? There are a limited number of phrases in the English language after all. So we can't have that at all. Right? We can't have those blanket uniform phrases for everything. So pick out something from the speech for your transition. Basically something from the objectives or from the speech itself. So for example, now for today's transition, I used something from the objectives of the speech, right? Because the objective stated that humor, you need to deliver something through humor, you need to deliver a message through the humor in your speech. So this is what I used for the transition, that this was one of the objectives, and at this point I would like to come to my recommendations, and then my first recommendation was about the central theme or the message of the speech. Okay? So this instantly connects the commendations and recommendations. It serves as a bridge between the two without using some very common phrase that we have become very used to. Right? It quickly brings some variety into our delivery and sets the evaluation apart at this point. So now once we have this in place, now we have the transition in place, we have the commendations, we have the recommendations. At the end, if we have enough time. Now I don't always do this, it depends on the time which I have. Generally I don't have enough time at the end of the evaluation. So I don't end with the commendations. It's not compulsory that every time you have to end with the commendation. If you have a C for the commendation, R recommendations, at the end it's okay to just summarize the speech. Because if you're anyway in the summary, the first thing that you're going to give is the highlight of the speech. Now the summary is an extremely critical part for any evaluation, even for a normal meeting or even for a contest, from both perspectives. For a contest, the summation has specifically points allotted in the judges' ballot criteria. So that is something we need to keep in mind. And for a general meeting as well, what a summary does is that it serves as a quick reminder of what were the highlights of the speech and what is the one key recommendation for the speech. These are the only two things that we need to have in the summary. The one best part about the speech and the one thing that the speaker definitely we feel as an evaluator that the speaker definitely needs to improve on. That's it. Just 2 lines is sufficient for the summary, but those 2 lines have to be included. Right? So this is basically what will form the structure of our evaluation. Now in this CRC format, in this structure that I spoke of, there is an additional thing that we can do if it works out. Now it may not work out for every speech. It's difficult to work out for every speech, but if it does, it works fantastic. It's a very fantastic way. That is having an analogy. Now if you have a speech that is in some way that can be related to something from the content of the speech that is, then it works. So for example, I'll give an example that I used at a contest. So now if suppose it's a speech about, it has something about photography. So what you can have is that in any good photograph, when you need to keep the right things in focus. Right? So that's the focus thing of the analogy works with the photograph, and the same thing works for speech. That is the highlights of the speech or the things that the speaker kept in focus. So that can serve as my opening. Now all of these things that I spoke of, if we have one analogy, in one sweep it takes care of all of these, including my opening, my transition and my conclusion. So this is an example of the opening. Now for the transition from commendations to recommendation, I can just say I use this, that there were some things that were not in focus in this photograph, in the speech that the speaker had to do. So these are my recommendations. So point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, whatever it was. And at the end, I can just say that these, at my summary, again the same thing can be used, that these were the things that were in focus and these were the things that were out of focus. And if these things are kept in mind, I'm sure there can be an even better photograph that will come out next time. Right? So this analogy is something that we have to make sure that we include only if it works. Because otherwise, if we have something pre-made in our mind that we're going to go with, and then we try to force it in, it immediately comes across as something that we're trying to force. And now, for anyone in the audience or for a judge, this applies to everyone. If we feel that the speaker is trying to force in something that is not happening naturally, you lose current instantly there. So this analogy thing needs to be kept in mind, that use it only if it works. Otherwise, you can go with the previous structure that I talked about. Right? So this is basically more or less everything that is to do with the structuring on paper and in our delivery. Now, in a speech, in an evaluation, the most important thing that we do is about the commendation that we make, right? And phrasing our recommendations effectively is an art. Phrasing them in such a way that the person you are delivering the feedback to actually wants to listen to it, actually wants to implement it, is an extremely critical skill that we learn through evaluation. So there are a few things that we need to keep in mind here. Now again, for recommendations, I basically have a structure that I use for any recommendation that I give, which serves this purpose. So the first thing for any recommendation needs to be what you saw or what you heard in the speech. So I'll now explain this with an example as we go on. So if I have a recommendation about, say, eye contact, right? So what I saw or what I heard is that the eye contact of the speaker was not there throughout. That is just my observation. That is the first part of my recommendation. Now the next part of my recommendation is what impact did that actually have? Right? Because whatever I saw, what I heard, whatever the act was, what impact did it have on everyone in the audience? So the impact here of the lack of eye contact was that there was not enough connect between the speaker and the audience. Right? So that was the impact. Now, third part of the recommendation is what can the speaker do to improve it? Because as an evaluator, we also need to tell the speaker ways in which they can improve. Just pointing out mistakes is not enough, because it's not going to serve any purpose if you are just going to sit and point out mistakes. It's here that exemplifying recommendations comes into play. Right? It's critical to make sure that you exemplify each and every recommendation that we give. So here, for eye contact, a simple technique that the speaker can use is to draw a Z with the eyes in the room. So if it's a rectangular room, you can draw a Z with your eyes. This technique ensures that the speaker is going to cover every single person sitting in the audience. Okay? So this is something that I gave as a specific takeaway, that this is what the speaker can do to correct that, whatever the recommendation was. Another simple example regarding this, if suppose it's a recommendation about now voice modulation. Okay? So if I felt that the speaker's voice was very flat throughout, I can pick out an example from the speech that this is a sentence. This is the way in which it was said. Instead, this same sentence could have been said in this way. Because now what it does is it gives the speaker something very, very specific to take away. That I did this in this way, but if I could have done this instead, I think it would have served better. So this is the third part of the recommendation, that is exemplifying. And the fourth, last part is explaining what impact it would have if the speaker incorporates that recommendation. So again, in this eye contact example, if the speaker can incorporate this, then maybe it will help for the speaker to connect with the audience better. Maybe it will help for the audience to better understand the message. So that is the fourth part of my recommendation. Okay. So this is basically forms a complete well-rounded recommendation. First is what I saw or what I heard. Second is what impact it had. Third, an example how it can be corrected. And fourth, what impact would it have if it was corrected. So these 4 points together will form a complete well-rounded recommendation. Now in any speech, the most critical part of it, now in my opinion, the most important project in the CC manual is CC3, right? Because this is the speech which talks about the specific purpose and the general purpose of the speech. So while evaluating any speech, we need to keep the objectives of this speech in mind always. What was the general purpose of the speech? What was the specific purpose of the speech? And was it clearly seen throughout the speech? But any speech needs to be aligned to the specific purpose of that. Okay. Now this, right? So basically that's a key recommendation or commendation that any speech can have throughout uniform. So if we have a problem coming up with those, you have a quick fix here. Now, the second point I have is it's a simple technique that maybe we have heard before, but I'm just going to repeat it anyway. That is the glove technique. So we have 5 letters, an acronym basically. So glove, G is for gestures, L is for language, O is for organization, V for vocal variety, and E for enthusiasm. So these are 5 key points which can help us to analyze a speech properly. So if we are finding trouble getting into the specifics of a speech, finding proper commendations and recommendations, we can just remember this glove, and along these 5 points, a speech can be analyzed very well. This is something that covers all the basics of a speech. Okay. That is what I said about the specific purpose, general purpose, and the glove technique. So with these, if we have these 2 things in mind, you can rest assured that most of the things that are to be covered in any speech are going to be covered here. Now, in any speech, we also often see something, even in the judge's ballot, if we have seen it, about evaluating based on the content. Now, it's here there's a key differentiator, something that we need to keep in mind. So, once again, I would like to know from you what exactly it means to evaluate on the content of the speech. Anyone?
Does it add any new thought in my mind?
Right.
A new perspective for the existing scenario?
Right.
What the speech had take away from the content.
Right.
And basic thing is never try to repeat the content in a part of an evaluation.
Right. Right. So now in evaluating on content, it basically means, it does not mean evaluating the idea. It means evaluating the content only. So if I feel that I do not necessarily agree with what the speaker is saying, it's not my job as an evaluator to say that this thought process is not correct. Because that is the opinion of the speaker. As an evaluator, even my evaluation is only an opinion, and as such, I am not entitled to tell the speaker that the way in which you are thinking is wrong. When I say I am evaluating a content, I can only give recommendations, say, on the structure of the content, the structuring of the idea, the way in which those ideas were put forth, right? Or whether those ideas were adding value, but not on those ideas themselves. So this is a key differentiator, a key point that we need to keep in mind whenever we talk about evaluating any speech based on the content of it. Now, in the perspective of a contest, there are a few additional things that we have to keep in mind. So first, I will briefly touch upon the judge's ballot. So the judges ballot is divided into 4 sections, ARTS, right? Art, it's again a simple acronym that you can remember. So first is the analytical quality of the evaluation. That carries 40 points. So the ballot has a total of 100 points. Of those, 40 points are for the analytical quality. So basically this is how well the speech was analyzed, how well did the evaluator pick out points from the speech to comment on, what were the little things that the evaluator was able to pick out on. So this is what basically is covered in the part of about analytical quality. Second R is about recommendations, that is for 30 points. So this will basically cover as to what recommendations the evaluator had, how well they were framed. So this the 4-point structure that we talked about will basically take care of this. The next is T for technique, which has 15 points again. So this thing covers the delivery of your evaluation. Basically, the key ingredient for any evaluation is sympathy. Any evaluation needs to be sympathetic. You need to make the speaker feel that you are actually there to genuinely help them out. You are not just sitting there to point out their mistakes, you are there with them as a part of their process to help them improve. Okay? So to help the speaker feel that you are actually a part of that process, sympathy is a very critical ingredient, and it's here that the technique part of it comes into play. Okay? How well you can display that sympathy through your delivery and through the words that you use. Okay? So that will cover the part of technique, and last 15 points are under summation. Now you'll get why I said the summation is very important, because out of 115 points are there just for those 2 lines. So this covers the basic idea of what is there in a contest evaluation. Now there are a couple of additional things that we can use in any evaluation, but specifically if used in a contest, it sets the evaluation apart, it adds something different to it. That is, one is humor and the second is use of force. Now if those two can be combined, nothing better than it, like I did today. Okay. So if those humor and force can be combined, then it's the best combination. If not, still those can be used to add some value to set it apart. Maybe you get a solution. So humor in an evaluation can come through anything, and it may come through things that you didn't even expect to have humor in it. So again, I'll give a personal example. Last year at the area contest. So what happened was, the speaker had a speech where he talked about I think he received an admission letter from Harvard, and he chose to reject it. So he had the opportunity to go to Harvard, but because of some different ideas that he had in mind, he chose to reject that opportunity. So to symbolize that, what he did was, he had a sheet of paper and envelope that he had brought along, and he had torn it on stage to show that, to signify, to symbolize that he rejected that opportunity. So what he did was, he gently tore it on stage. Okay? Now that point in the speech was a turning point. It was where basically it was the hinge of the speech, where the speech completely turned around. That this is the way in which the speech is going, and then he said, no, I rejected that. So that moment needs to be delivered with force. It had a lot of emotion in it. So my recommendation there was that when you have a turning point in the speech which has so much emotion, that emotion needs to come through in everything, including words, in the way in which you say it, and your actions as well. So now in an evaluation contest, you don't have things that you can take along, right? Because you have to keep everything aside while going up there. The only thing you can take up is the notes that you get, one sheet of paper and your pen. That's all. So again, there is scope for creativity here, where you actually use those things as props. Right? No one has said that you can't use the things that you are permitted to bring on stage as props. Right? So we have the opportunity to use those here. So what I did was, to show that, I tore my contest notes there on stage. Okay. So that was something that I didn't really think. I thought maybe it might work, but I didn't really have anything to show an example. So this was again something to follow, that exemplify your recommendation. Now to exemplify my recommendation, to show about how you need to tear a sheet of paper, the best way to do that is to tear a sheet of paper myself. And the only sheet of paper that I had was my contest notes. Right? So this is something, it was a small point. I didn't know if it was going to work, but it turned out that it worked very, very well. And that was the one key thing which set my evaluation apart in the contest. Okay? So it's this humor at unexpected points. You never know when it will work. But if it does work, then yeah, it's something that's going to hit, definitely. So that is one thing that we can use in a contest, that is humor. And second is the use of quotes. Now quotes again, you can't put them in willy-nilly. They need to be put in properly with thought, with context. And here we can make sure that we properly prepare. So now if you are preparing for a contest, we can keep a list of quotes ready that can be applicable in different situations and use them as and when necessary. So now the same point applies here, that don't try to force them in. If you try to force them in, it's easily apparent to everyone and you are going to lose that connect. Right? You come across as being too artificial. So we never want that. So this is the second point. If the quotes work, then we can go through with them. So I think we are reaching the end of time and quickly get to my final conclusion, that is, there are some words that we especially need to be careful about by using in any evaluation, because an evaluation is only an opinion that we have, and as such we need to ensure that we evaluate only the speech and not the speaker. So in this context there are a few words we need to be careful about. First is the word should. Now should indicates a compulsion that the speaker should have done this, right? So now we as evaluators are not entitled to tell the speaker that you should have done this. We can say that I felt that this was something that was lacking and instead you could have done this. Right? You could have done this and maybe this would have helped the speech in this way. So that is the first thing. And the next is a bunch of three words together, but, however, and although. Now all of these three words in the English language need to be always used very carefully. Why? Because these words can negate whatever we said before that. If I say that your voice modulation was good, but the structure was bad, then it's gone. Anything that was said before the but is now not applicable anymore. We wipe that out. So in an evaluation, we need to ensure that the commendations and recommendations both have equal weight. And in this context, these three words, however, but, and although, need to be carefully used. Because even in the end, if we say that, however, the speech was good, I have these things the speech was good. You know what I'm saying. It again is going to do the same thing, that is, it reduces the impact of the commendation, it reduces the weight of it. So these are the three words that we need to ensure we use very, very carefully if we are going to use them at all. And the last word is, now something I've again noticed very, very often, is the use of the word you. Now if it's going to be something, I'm an evaluator and there is one speaker sitting here, I'm evaluating it, and if I keep saying you, that you did this, you did not do that, your voice modulation was good, etc., etc., what happens is, I lose connect with the audience. The rest of the people feel excluded, it becomes a one-on-one conversation between the speaker and the evaluator. And if I'm going to keep saying you, I'm also subconsciously going to focus my eye contact on the speaker only, and I'm not going to look at the other people in the audience. The other people in the audience may naturally feel, what's in it for me? Why am I listening? If it's just a conversation between these two, why am I listening? So to avoid this, we need to ensure that this word is also used properly. So in this context, simple technique to use is, take the name of the speaker, like I did today, like Toastmasters did this, didn't do that, whatever. Or just say the speaker. Because it's apparent, everyone knows who the speaker was. So even if I don't take the name, it's clear to everyone who the speaker was. So these are basically a few things that, a few words that we need to keep in mind, a few do's and don'ts, I would call it, for any evaluation. And this applies to any evaluation, not just for a contest or for a meeting, for any evaluation. Because a good evaluation in a meeting or in a contest is still a good evaluation always. You don't have specifically a good, oh, this was only good for a contest or this was only good for a meeting. A good evaluation is always a good evaluation. So we also need to keep that in mind, that consistent practice in any meeting, treating any evaluation with equal respect, equal preparation is the key to improving. So that's more or less what I wanted to say. Now if we have maybe 5 minutes, we can have. Do we have 5 minutes for question answer?
5 minutes, yeah. Any questions?
Okay.
So basically, most of the times, the body language or the stage usage feedback is given in the evaluation. So do you have any recommendation that what can be look into that when they are using stage usage and body language?
Now for this specifically, stage use or any body language for its own sake is not really something that adds value. to the speech. So if we want to use the stage or if we want to properly use body language, it needs to be done in such a way that it complements the content of the speech only, not just for its own sake. So if we have to give a recommendation on that, it needs to be aligned according to this as to whether or not it complemented the content of the speech itself. So if it does, then well and good. If not, then you have a recommendation ready to give to the speaker.
I have questions. You said we have to base our evaluation based on the love technique, right? Now, take for instance, I have probably 4 things or 5 things which I judge him on. His content, his total variety, but I have only 3 minutes, right? So how do I say that this recommendation or this commendation, how do I make sure that whatever points I give him, how do I give what priority I should give to which recommendation or which recommendation?
Right. So now for this, generally we only have 3.5 minutes max, right, to cover our whatever points that we had. So here what I have noticed is that at most you can fit in 4 to 5 commendations and 3 recommendations in this maximum. That's the upper limit. If we go beyond that, we are likely to get disqualified. Okay. So it's important, right? It's a good point, right? It's important to know what to prioritize in giving our evaluation. So here, as I said, it's the key points which need to come across. Now, for example, if I have, say, a recommendation, I have a host of recommendations, suppose, and maybe not all of them are relevant to this current problem, maybe not all of them apply here. So if it was, suppose, a speech that did not really require voice modulation could have complemented the speech, but it was not a critical part of the speech. Suppose it was not a story. Stories are something for which voice modulation is extremely important. But if it was not a story, and it's okay, voice modulation could have added something to it, but it was not essential. So we can feel free to skip that out and instead make sure that we include something that is more relevant to the objectives of the current speech. Right? So in this way, basically, again, the one thing that we go by is the objectives of the speech. Based on that, we can prioritize what will be our commendations and recommendations.
I have a question. So,
Yeah.
so this is a feedback that I previously got. Like when you begin an evaluation, the first few minutes, like first minute or so, when you just come on stage, like you said, you're likely to make some personal, like whatever you personally felt, right? I've got this feedback saying that's not a time for you to entertain the audience and it should be more about the speaker.
Right.
I mean, how do you balance that? Like, how do you
Right.
also?
So for the opening comment, that's special. It just needs to be a line or two, just enough to get everyone interested and get what personal impact it had on you across. Okay? So that's pretty much it. Now this also is relevant to the point that Rohan mentioned about not summarizing the speech, right? Because again, it's an opinion. The evaluation is only an opinion of the speech. You are not supposed to be summarizing the speech. Everyone already heard the speech. No one wants to listen to the speech again in 2 minutes. Right? So it's here. All of these things come into play. That you don't need to entertain the audience. What you need to offer the audience instead is your opinion, your inputs on the speech itself, your comments on it. So in this context, it's I think it would pretty much work like this, that anything you feel that complements to the delivery or the acceptance of whatever you are going to say is okay to use. If it's just going to be put in for showboating, then like the first thing you need to do is cut that part off. If and only if it actually helps in the actual delivery of it, in the understanding of it for the audience, then you can include it. And then also making sure that it does not take too much time, because you only have 3.5 minutes for it. So if this introduction for some part of it is going to take 15-20 seconds, then skip it.
How do you weigh your pros and the cons? Take for instance, I have 4 recommendations and 4 commendations. So that everything I cannot fit in. I will be able to give only probably 2 commendations and probably 4 recommendations. So what will you choose? You will choose 4 commendations, 2 recommendations, or you will take 2 commendations and 4 recommendations.
Okay.
How do you weigh that?
Okay. So ideally, always the number of commendations should be more than the number of recommendations. So if you have this scenario of 4 and 2, then still 4 commendations and 2 recommendations is the better one to go with, because any negative feedback that you have tends to carry more weight irrespective of how you are going to phrase it. So if I have 4 commendations and 2 recommendations, it's going to come out as a balanced evaluation. If I have 2 commendations and 4 recommendations, it's going to come out as just a criticism of the speech, even if there were 2 commendations in it, right? Because that's how the mind works. So that's why for the balance, it's always better to go with more commentations than the number of recommendations that we have. And if there are any specific inputs that you need to give to the speaker is always available to talk one-on-one afterwards. So that's the avenue to use. Okay, I think we are at the end of it. So thank you very much. Hope you all had something to learn from the session.
Yes.
And if there are any questions, then maybe we can collect after the meeting.
Thank you, Himanshu. I think it was reasonable that you must have put a lot of